When the screen cut to black at the end of Season 3, Episode 10, it didn't just mark the closing of another chapter, it felt like the end of an era. Fans were left with one burning question. Was this the moment that sealed Belly and Conrad's love story forever, or was it the final goodbye we never wanted to face? The air was heavy with emotions, not only because of what was said, but also because of what remained unspoken. This wasn't just another teen romance ending, it was a bittersweet reflection of choices, sacrifices, and the kind of love that changes you forever. And if you look closely, every second of the finale carried hints about what Belly and Conrad's future might really look like. The road to the ending was not a straight one. Episode 10 pulled Belly into the center of an emotional storm, one where love, friendship, and family all collided. We watched her torn between the comfort of what she thought she wanted and the undeniable pull of what her heart kept whispering. At first, it almost seemed like Jeremiah was going to be the one who stood by her side, offering her stability, warmth, and a future without confusion. His presence felt safe, like a steady light in the middle of chaos. Yet the shadow of Conrad was always there. Even in the moments Belly tried hardest to move forward, the episode carefully built tension by weaving together all the loose threads from earlier in the season. Every smile, every argument, and every lingering glance carried more weight than ever before. We saw Belly struggle not just with her feelings, but also with the fear of making the wrong choice, something that has haunted her since Season 1. Conrad's absence in some scenes spoke louder than words, a silence that was almost unbearable, while Jeremiah's closeness tested the line between love and comfort. One of the most powerful parts of Episode 10 came when Belly was forced to look at herself and finally admit that choosing between Conrad and Jeremiah was not about breaking someone's heart, it was about being honest with her own. This realization shaped the path toward the ending. It wasn't about who deserved her more, but about who truly held her heart. And even before the final scene, you could see it in her eyes. Belly already knew the answer, though saying it out loud was a different kind of battle. The family dynamics also reached their breaking point in this episode. The Fisher family, scarred by grief and change, reminded us once again that this story has never just been about romance. It's been about growing up, facing loss, and realizing that love comes with both joy and pain. Laurel's presence grounded Belly, serving as a reminder that love is not only about passion, but also about respect, truth, and courage. As Episode 10 pushed forward, everything felt heavier. The music was softer, the pauses between words grew longer, and the looks exchanged between Belly and Conrad were almost too much to bear. Every moment seemed to point toward the inevitable. Belly's heart was moving in one direction, even if her mind was still catching up. By the time the final minutes arrived, viewers weren't just watching a scene unfold, they were witnessing years of longing, mistakes, and hope finally collide. That's why the ending felt so charged. It wasn't simply a choice between two brothers, it was Belly choosing who she was and what kind of love she wanted to fight for. Episode 10 didn't rush this journey. Instead, it let every emotion settle like waves, pulling us closer and closer until the last conversation between Belly and Conrad became more than a scene. It became the heart of the entire season. The final scene between Belly and Conrad was not loud or explosive. It didn't need to be. Instead, it carried the weight of years of love, mistakes, and second chances wrapped into a quiet moment that spoke louder than any dramatic speech ever could. When they finally faced each other, it felt as if time itself slowed down. Every breath, every glance, every hesitation carried meaning. Conrad wasn't the same boy we first met at Cousins Beach. He was older, more scarred by loss, yet also more open than he had ever been. And Belly wasn't the same girl who once wondered if he would ever see her. She was stronger now, braver, and finally ready to stop running from her own heart. The beauty of this scene lies in what wasn't said. Conrad's eyes, filled with unspoken apologies, told us more than words could. He didn't need to repeat every mistake, every regret, because his body language carried it all. His voice wavered when he finally confessed the truth that had always been between them. He loved her, and he always had. It wasn't a polished, perfect declaration. It was raw, messy, and honest. Exactly the way first love tends to be. Belly's reaction was just as powerful. For so long, she had been caught in the storm of wanting to be chosen, wanting to feel certain. But here, in this quiet ending, she realized that Conrad had chosen her long ago is just buried under fear and silence. The way she looked at him, with tears in her eyes but a steadiness in her expression, showed us that this wasn't about teenage infatuation anymore. It was about a love that had weathered distance, heartbreak, and doubt, yet still survived. The dialogue, though simple, carried echoes of every season. Conrad's hesitant pauses mirrored those same moments back in Season 1, when he would hide behind silence instead of saying what he felt. But this time, he didn't hide. This time, he allowed himself to be vulnerable, and that shift was monumental. It showed his growth, not just as Belly's love interest, but as a person learning to face his emotions rather than bury them. And then there was Belly's choice. The scene made it clear that she wasn't just saying yes to Conrad. She was saying yes to herself, to the part of her that had always known he was the one, even when she tried to convince herself otherwise. The way she stepped toward him, closing the distance, was symbolic. It wasn't about waiting for him to come to her anymore. It was about meeting him halfway, taking equal responsibility for their love. Even the smallest details of this final scene mattered. The background music was soft, almost whispering beneath their voices, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The lighting cast them in a gentle glow, reminiscent of those summer nights at Cousins Beach when everything felt possible. Their closeness, the way they leaned in just slightly, the way Conrad's hand hovered before finally reaching for hers, was a reminder that love is not just about words, but about courage. What truly made this ending unforgettable was how it tied back to the essence of the story. Belly and Conrad's journey has always been about more than romance. It has been about timing, about growing up, about learning that love is not easy but worth the fight. This scene captured all of that. It showed us that while Jeremiah represented comfort and clarity, Conrad represented something deeper, an unshakable bond that, despite all odds, could not be broken. By the time the screen faded, viewers weren't left with a dramatic kiss or a dramatic promise. Instead, we were left with something more powerful, the understanding that Belly and Conrad had finally reached a place of truth. No more running, no more hiding, just two people standing in the open, acknowledging what had always been there. It was tender, it was heartbreaking, and it was hopeful all at once. That's why this ending resonates so strongly. It wasn't the fireworks kind of love story. It was the kind that lingers long after the credits roll. The kind that reminds us that some connections are written deep into our lives, and no matter how far we drift, we find our way back. For Belly and Conrad, this final scene wasn't just about falling in love again. It was about finally choosing each other, fully and completely. The ending of Season 3, Episode 10 didn't just rely on dialogue to deliver its impact. It was built on layers of symbolism and subtle callbacks that tied Belly and Conrad's story into something larger than a summer romance. Every choice, from the setting to the silence between their words, was carefully designed to reflect who they had become and where they were headed. To truly understand the finale, you have to look beyond the surface and see what the story was telling us without ever saying it out loud. The setting itself was the first layer of meaning. Belly and Conrad's final moment took place in a quiet, stripped-down space, nothing flashy, nothing distracting. It was almost bare, as though the world around them had fallen away. This mirrored their emotional journey. After years of noise, drama, and love triangles, everything had been stripped back to just the two of them. No Jeremiah, no confusion, no pretending. Just Belly and Conrad standing face to face finally, forced to confront the truth they had been running from. The simplicity of the scene told us that love, at its core, doesn't need grand gestures. It only needs honesty. Lighting played an equally important role. The glow was soft and warm, casting them in the kind of light that feels safe, intimate, and forgiving. It wasn't the harsh sunlight of Cousins Beach summers or the cold shadows of heartbreak. It was something in between, a twilight atmosphere that suggested both an ending and a beginning. This duality was powerful. It reminded viewers that Belly and Conrad's love story had gone through countless endings. But here was proof that endings can also hold the seed of new beginnings. Even the music carried meaning. The soft score under their final exchange didn't swell dramatically or overpower the scene. Instead, it echoed like a memory, a gentle thread pulling us back through the seasons. It was as if the show itself wanted us to remember all the moments that led here, the late-night talks, the stolen glances, the heartbreaks, and the reconciliations. The music reminded us that this wasn't just a new chapter. It was the culmination of everything they had endured. Symbolism also appeared in the smallest gestures. Conrad's hesitation before reaching for Belly's hand symbolized his long struggle with fear of loss, fear of not being enough, fear of being left behind. That brief pause told the story of a boy who had spent years holding back, only to finally find the courage to step forward. Belly's steady gaze in return symbolized her growth. She was no longer the uncertain girl waiting for someone else to define her worth. She was choosing him with clarity, strength, and confidence. That exchange of energy was more powerful than any declaration. They were meeting as equals for the first time. The silence in the scene was perhaps the most striking symbol of all. For 3 seasons, Belly and Conrad's love story has been full of miscommunication, words left unsaid, and emotions buried beneath the surface. But in this moment, the silence wasn't a wall between them. It was a bridge. It allowed them to exist in the truth without forcing it into tidy sentences. That silence told us everything. They no longer needed to prove or explain their love. It was enough to stand there, together, in a rare moment of peace. And then there's the deeper symbolism tied to their journey as a whole. Belly and Conrad have always represented the complexity of first love. Unlike Jeremiah, who symbolized stability and comfort, Conrad symbolized growth, the messy, painful kind that forces you to confront yourself. Choosing Conrad wasn't just Belly choosing a boy. It was her choosing the part of herself that wanted to risk heartbreak for the chance at something extraordinary. That's why their love has always felt more complicated, and why the finale leaned into this symbolism. Love worth fighting for isn't neat, but it is transformative. There were also subtle callbacks hidden in their interactions. The way Conrad looked at Belly mirrored the first season, when he would watch her from a distance, unable to say what he felt. Only now, instead of distance, there was closeness. Instead of silence out of fear, there was silence out of understanding. It was a full-circle moment that symbolized how far they had come, not just as individuals, but as a pair bound by years of history. Ultimately, the hidden meaning of the ending was this: true love doesn't erase pain, but it survives it. Belly and Conrad's final scene wasn't about pretending everything would be perfect from here. It was about accepting that love is imperfect and still choosing it anyway. The symbolism in the quiet setting, the warm light, the soft music, and the silence between them all pointed to one truth. Their story wasn't about finding a fairy tale ending. It was about finding the courage to face reality together. The ending of Season 3, Episode 10 left fans divided. Was it a happy ending? A bittersweet one, or just the beginning of another storm? The truth is, this final moment between Belly and Conrad was never meant to give us a neat, tied-up bow. Instead, it gave us something far more real, hope wrapped in uncertainty. And that's what makes it so powerful. The way their story concluded wasn't about sealing their fate forever. It was about opening the door to the possibility of a future built on honesty and choice. For Belly, this moment marked a transformation. Throughout the series, she's wrestled with questions of identity. Am I the girl who chases after the boy who can't love me back? Am I the girl who chooses the safe love over the risky one? Or am I someone who finally learns to listen to her heart without fear of judgment? By choosing Conrad at the end, she wasn't just choosing romance, she was choosing the version of herself that was willing to step into uncertainty for the sake of something real. Her growth has been one of the most compelling parts of this journey, and the finale symbolized that she had finally stopped living in the shadow of her doubt. Conrad's arc was equally significant. For so long, he's been the boy who carried his pain silently, shutting out the world rather than risk showing weakness. His hesitation, his walls, his distance, they were all defense mechanisms. But in episode 10, when he finally allowed himself to admit his feelings to Belly, it was a breakthrough years in the making. His willingness to be vulnerable wasn't just a turning point in their relationship. It was proof that Conrad was finally ready to grow into the man who could love fully and without fear. This ending wasn't about a perfect resolution. It was about Conrad proving to himself and to Belly that he could fight for love instead of running from it. And then there's Jeremiah. His absence in the finale's last moments spoke volumes. While he had always been the steady presence, the safe option, the one who wore his heart on his sleeve, the ending showed us that safety doesn't always equal fulfillment. Jeremiah represented a path Belly could have taken, a path of stability, warmth, and less uncertainty. But by choosing Conrad, the story reminded us that love isn't about choosing what's easiest. It's about choosing what feels undeniable. Jeremiah's heartbreak will certainly echo into future seasons, and it raises a question that still lingers. Can the Fisher brothers ever truly heal? Or has Belly's choice permanently fractured their bond? Thematically, this ending positioned Belly and Conrad's story as less of a conclusion and more of a transition. Their future is not guaranteed. It's uncertain, fragile, and still vulnerable to the weight of their past mistakes. But that's also what makes it so human. Real love doesn't come with guarantees. It comes with effort, forgiveness, and the willingness to try again even when failure seems likely. This is what makes their ending so relatable. It tells us that love is not about perfection, but about choosing each other over and over, even when it's hard. For fans wondering about Season 4, this finale laid the groundwork for new layers of conflict and resolution. Will Belly and Conrad's relationship survive outside the bubble of Cousins Beach? Can they handle the pressures of adulthood, distance, and the lingering wounds of the past? And perhaps most importantly, will Conrad continue to show up for Belly the way he finally did in episode 10, or will old habits resurface? These are questions deliberately left open, inviting us to hope but also to worry. Still, the emotional core of the finale makes one thing clear. Belly and Conrad are not finished. Their story is far from over. The way they looked at each other in those final seconds was not the look of closure. It was the look of two people realizing they are still at the beginning of something worth fighting for. The ending was not about tying up the love triangle neatly. It was about reminding us that love isn't a prize to be won, but a choice to be made, and they both finally made it. So, what does this mean for their future? It means that while nothing is certain, everything is possible. Belly and Conrad will stumble, they will fall, and they will hurt each other again. But they will also grow, learn, and hold on to the fact that love, no matter how messy, is worth the risk. And that's the message this ending leaves us with. Not a perfect promise, but a hopeful one. A reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose love, even when the future is unknown.